Okay, so are we ready to start? It seems so. Yeah. Well, the pace of change has never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again. These are the words of Justin Trudeau, and in 2018 in Davos, and that was even before the COVID outbreak, the Ukraine war, and so on. So that's why we are actually here, because the pace of change is so fast. So tervetuloa, tere tulemast, welcome to our Prosci European Tour event with the topic of how to be more successful with change and to gain competitive advantage with organization-wide change capability. This event is arranged in cooperation with Prosci, with change partners, and with Eezy. And for those who don't yet know it, Prosci is the world leader in research-based change management solutions, methodologies, and so on. So when you work with Prosci, you get access to more than 25 years of research, industry-leading research, and experience on what it takes to drive change successfully. And about the companies, also Change Partners is Prosci's global affiliate that has brought Prosci in Estonia, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania. And Eezy is Change Partners' partner here in Finland. Yeah, and my name is Teppo Kolehmainen. I am the CEO of Change Partners Finland. And I also work as a change consultant for Eezy. Well, besides this live event here in Helsinki, we are actually streaming this to online viewers in the Baltic states and also in Finland. So warm welcome to our guests online too. Some practicalities, perhaps. Here in Helsinki, lunch is served throughout the event. So we will have only one 15-minute break, and we are a lot of people here. So you are free to get food during the event and use, of course, the restrooms also during the event, throughout the event. But I just have one request. Please respect our speakers, so that you keep the voice down, try to avoid any loud noises here, if it's okay. Let's try to manage this together. So I have the pleasure to co-host this event together with my friend, colleague, and partner, Ekke Sööt from Change Partners in Estonia. So welcome, Ekke, and
Thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah, how exciting to see all of you. So thank you so much for your time, starting your day really early. This is a proof, actually, that change management is in a momentum, actually, globally. Since we started and became Prosci affiliate partner in the region 5 or 6 years ago, actually it has become quite a mature, or at least it has matured a lot, the whole business. One proof of that, of course, is the context where we live. So to show you the VUCA world, the crazy world where all of you probably have to make your decisions. That's around, that's the big cause of all of the changes. I'm sure that one or another of these is the reality of your business daily, every day. So let me ask, think about your organizations for a second. And let's do a little hand raising here to get you awake. So who feels that the amount of change has been increasing in recent years? You can do it virtual as well. So show by hands. Thank you. Quite expected, right?
It's not only Justin Trudeau then.
Yeah, no, not only his problem. And now think about your people, your organization. So who feels that actually the readiness that your people are feeling it's harder and harder to cope, are feeling some saturation? Raise a hand. So they cannot cope or deal with that increasing amount. Also, at least half of the people. And so what to do is a philosophical question then. If one arrow pushes us up more and more crazy, another arrow actually demands us to be more down to earth and think how we manage all of that with our people. So my answer is pretty straightforward, and I know process as well. We need to rethink how we change. We need to be systematically better at it. And that's what we hope. So that's why we're here, I hope as well. Another little context I wanted to provide, this is coming straight from the most recent study of Prosci as well, is over 75% of leaders globally actually state that we are change saturated. It's too much going on. It's certainly it has consequences. So you could say consequences to people, first of all. So people falling out, getting burned out, getting tired, not performing maximum. Consequences to projects. So of course, delays, it's harder and harder to deliver on budgets, etc. And also consequences to organizations, that's what you care of. So this is, it's harder and harder to execute on strategy. It's hard to innovate. This is the background to this. And of course, another philosophical question is what to do then? You could say we have two options. One is to cut down the number of changes. So now think about how many of you are in this position. Can you cut down digitalization or you name it? Can we really? And then another real option is to think about how we approach it, how we increase the readiness, the capability, organizational change muscle, you may call it this way. So that can be done. And so final thought I wanted to leave you with in the beginning here is it's a quote I really think it resonates with many leaders today. So in the context of uncertainty, where we need to decide and be present, so the best thing is to increase your internal certainty of what you can deliver as organization. So think about it. Increase your internal certainty of what you can deliver. And that's so much connected to change capability, what we're going to talk about today. The better we can do that, the more likely it is that we will succeed. So that's what we can control. We cannot control the outside world. And with that quote, I would like to hand it over to my colleague from Prosci, Anne McConnell, who will introduce the keynote speaker as well. Anne has one interesting message for you from the Global Best Practice European participants.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Anne.
Good morning, and thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. We're really thrilled that you're here, so thank you for joining us. Quick question. Do we have any Brené Brown fans in the room? All the women. Yeah! One of my favorite quotes from Brené Brown, it almost sounds like it was written for Prosci. Change is uncomfortable. It's hard as hell. And when leaders expect others to change without participating or holding themselves accountable, it's almost impossible. Almost. So, Ukraine war, energy crisis, healthcare changes, lower than expected earnings, volatile markets, and here in Finland, some new political policies that are causing some unrest. Now, being from America, we don't understand that at all. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to ground us in some research. And you will hear research from us a lot, because this is what we base everything we do on, and we're very proud of it. Teppo mentioned we're in our 25th year of delivering research. We have the largest body of change management research in the world, And my favorite stat this year, out of more than 2,600 respondents this year, half were from Europe for the first time ever, tied with the US. So that makes me very happy. So we pulled together a couple of notable observations for Europe. The first being top industries are digital transformation, sustainability, and regulatory compliance. Those all make sense, right? Digital transformation, there's a ton of it happening. Sustainability is an interesting one because that's not one we see at the top or near the top in the United States, unfortunately. And then regulatory compliance. Makes sense that the more regulated you have to be, the more documented you have to be, and the more accountable you have to be to your changes. Number 2, half of project sponsor, yeah, that's what I was looking for. So, number 1, is your organization prepared for these industry-wide changes? Number 2, half of project sponsors have adequate or complete understanding of their role in change management. What does that mean? Half don't. If you're familiar with our research, you know that sponsors are the largest contributor to success. So the fact that only half of our sponsors are aware of what we're doing is a big challenge. Are your executives prepared to lead the people side of change? Number 3, people managers remain the most resistant group, followed by employees. So it's not the sponsors that are the most resistant group, it's the people managers. So are your people managers prepared? How are you motivating them? How are you training them? How are you equipping, preparing, and supporting them? Nearly 3 in 4 participants agreed that they need a structured approach to change management. I was visiting with a customer a couple months ago, and she said, this was in Europe. She said, we don't need Prosci. I have a 242-slide presentation that I've compiled over 20 years. Every methodology is covered, and I train people with that. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well then why are we doing a certification with your people right now? She couldn't answer my question. So are you leaving change to chance, or are you managing it by choice? Number 5, 75% of organizations are nearing or past the point of saturation. To Teppo's point, people are tired. I mean, the amount of change that I described, that Teppo described, we haven't even started talking about your organizations yet. It's a tremendous amount of change. So are your employees change fatigued, and how are you supporting them? Our Chief Innovation Officer, Tim Creasy, likes to talk about a Peter Drucker, Jim Collins concept, which is how do we make our employees more productive, but at the same time, how do we be more humane? And I think an argument for that, for change management, is just that. We're helping our employees to be more productive, and we're doing it in a humane way, not just piling work onto them, but making the projects they're already doing more successful. And then finally, ominous storm cloud with an airplane flying into it, 84% expect the amount of change to increase slightly or significantly over the next 2 years. What capabilities are you building to prepare for this change? How will you manage this change? So thank you for allowing me to give a quick introduction. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Scott is the CEO at Prosci. He's lived on 3 continents. He's served customers in financial services, biotech, and healthcare, just to name a few. And I can personally say he's the reason I am at Prosci. So please help me welcome Scott.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne. That was kind of you. It is a great pleasure to be here, and I would love to start by thanking our friends at Change Partners and Eezy Flow for hosting such a wonderful event. I'd also like to thank each and every one of you that are in the room with us and online with us. You're giving up a healthy portion of your day. And one of my takeaways from the short time I've been in Finland this trip is change management is alive and well and is really trending up. And so it's great to see so much enthusiasm for what we're doing here. I'm going to talk about building the case for a change-capable organization. And the premise here is the winners of the future are not the ones that buy the technology fastest or that push their teams hardest. They're the ones that build a capability to outchange the competition. But not everyone agrees with that or understands that as a source of competitive advantage. And so we're going to start by talking about what is change management in context of what is enterprise change management about. We're going to spend some time talking about why leaders need to care about change management. And then we're also going to give you some tactics and a framework for you to enhance the organizational capabilities around change management. So that's where we're going to go. And at the core, change and strategy are almost synonymous. I've never met an organization who says our strategy for next year is to do the same thing we did this year. Every year, the strategic agenda brings change forward. We also understand that change is happening at a bigger scale than ever before and a faster pace than ever before. The days of doing small incremental changes in the corners of our organization are largely behind us, and we're having to wrestle much more complex change. The integration of people, process, and technology is much more common than an exception. And it's gotten much more multidisciplinary. The days of just doing incremental improvements with a single method in one corner of the business, those have been captured. We're having to now integrate change management with several other disciplines to be successful. And this was all pre-pandemic. And so you fast forward and the coronavirus arrives and all of us around the world are starting to experience a change that we've never gone through. And it's the first time in my lifetime that every human being on the planet is dealing with the same change at the same time. Pre-pandemic, a lot of times we felt like the crazy people in the corner starving for attention. Since the pandemic has come, I think leaders across the globe have now realized they are in the people business. Whether you build cars or sell insurance policies, it is still very much about the people in the organization. And we're not going back to the way it was. I still remember the early days of March and April where people said, work has changed forever. And I said, yeah, give us another month or two and we're going to get right back to the way it's always been. It's not going back to the way it's been. And so I've completely changed my perspective on what the pandemic has given to us in terms of the opportunity to promote the discipline of change management. And so as part of this, every single one of us went through a bit of an involuntary digital transformation. I joke at our firm, if you would have given us 6 months to prepare for the pandemic, it would have been a disaster. In 6 hours, we were able to make this happen with almost no option out. And so this involuntary digital transformation is something everyone experienced at the same time. Also, you couple that with an instantaneous remote work experiment. Maybe a show of hands. How many people expected their organizations to be more productive and more profitable with no one in an office? Anyone? 1 or 2 maybe, right? But this remote work experience has really been a huge success. And I don't think this is going to go back to the way it was, where we get up every morning and take a shower and put on our shows and go to an office. This hybrid environment is here to stay. So throughout our session today, we're going to try and make this interactive. So I'd encourage you to keep your devices handy. Any device you have that can connect to the internet would work. And we're excited to have the folks joining us online also participate. We use a polling platform called Poll Everywhere. So if you go to pollev.com/adcar, it's going to give you the ability to provide us feedback. So the first question is, what's the single most important change you have going on right now in your professional context? So we'd give it a couple of minutes for people to be able to punch in their answers, but we're going to start to see what's the single most important change each of you are experiencing. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, we go the old-fashioned way then. If we don't punch it in line, does anyone want to just shout out what's the number one change you're experiencing? It's back in, okay. Sustainability, yeah. As Anne said, this is a much bigger emphasis here in Europe than it is in many other parts of the world. Margin and revenue increase at the same time. Yes, I think everyone's experiencing the need to drive financial performance. Digital data and technology, I think almost every organization is somewhere on their digital transformation journey at the moment, and that's not unique. Yeah, organizational change, we see a lot of restructuring going on. Change of management and management team members is a constant as well. The days of forever employment are largely behind us, right? Artificial intelligence is obviously a big thing this year and has really exploded on the scene at a pace I don't think anyone would have expected. And so you're welcome to continue to plug these changes in. Part of what we'll do after the session is play this back to you. And I always find it fascinating to see what's happening today on September 11th is the most important change happening here in the Finland environment and across the Baltics.
And also the slides. We will provide the
Yes.
slides for your information. You don't have to photo everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you like. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard this term, we call it the decorazzi, where you put up a slide and everyone takes out their phone to take a picture. It's a sign. So I saw that with a lot of what Anne put together. All right, so keep your mobile devices handy. We're going to continue to ask you for some feedback as we go. But every one of those changes that's most important that you just plugged in has a technical side and a people side to it. The technical side is not just about technology, but that's how do we design, develop, and deliver the solution. The people side is how do we prepare the organization to embrace the solution, to adopt and to use it. And if we want to have successful outcomes from our change initiatives, we need to take a balanced approach. Oftentimes with technology, we focused almost all of the budget on building and configuring the systems. And rarely is it the buttons that don't work. It's typically the people that don't know how to use the system that keeps us from recognizing the benefits. And so if we want to have successful outcomes and deliver return on investment, we have to take a balanced approach to both the technical side and the people side. So next question is, how would you rate the effectiveness of change management in your organization? And so at the bottom here, it's a bit small text, but we've got a number of factors. But we're looking for feedback. Are you poor, fair, good, or excellent at managing the people side of change in your organization? So you get to drop a pin on here. Yeah.
The first answer was good.
Good. Yeah, we had one good, and then I went quickly, and you can't even read poor anymore. It got covered up. But yeah, we see a range here. I don't think anyone can say that we do this perfectly well. Change is an imperfect journey with trade-offs around every corner. But you can see that there's a broad spectrum. And then we know from where you are on the spectrum, we can then understand from our research how much benefit should you expect from your changes. So here we can see the percent of projects that meet or exceed expectations correlated with how well are you doing at the people side of change. And what I find interesting, if you go from poor to excellent, you're almost 7 times more likely to deliver the outcomes. Maybe even more interesting, if you go from poor to fair, you just take one step out of the basement, you're almost 3 times as likely to deliver the outcomes. And so one of the takeaways here is we don't need to let perfect get in the way of progress, and a small amount of change management investment can deliver really meaningful returns. Any project managers in the room? It's okay, you can admit it. Yeah. A lot of project managers say, well, I don't have time for this. You're going to slow me down and it's going to blow up my schedule and it's not going to work with my budget. But we know also that the better we address the people side of change, the better we're going to provide outcomes on time and within budget. And so the investment here in a small dose can pay a big return. We also understand that there are a number of contributors to success. And so Anne talked about active and visible sponsorship. Across 25 years of research, that has been the one consistent finding we've had, that active and visible research is the #1 predictor of change success. And what's interesting, all of the other factors have moved around. I've been at Prosci for 9 years, and no 2 years in a row have these factors remained constant. But you see, the second factor is apply a structured approach to change management. At Prosci, we're proud of having one of the strongest methodologies to address change at a project level, right? So we have this 3-phase process that has tools and deliverables inside of it, just like a project plan would. And so this works on the individual change that each of you said is most important. But the next question is, how many active changes are you experiencing right now? So here we're looking for a number, and so we'll use the polling platform, pollev.com/addcar. And I would love to hear, at one time right now, September 11th in 2023, how many active changes are you wrestling with? So we see number 6.
Some faces, some even can't count.
Yes, I saw a couple of faces of despair. But you can see hundreds, we see dozens, we see 40, we see 15. So at no one time are you dealing with one change. And to the points earlier, 3/4 of the people that respond in our survey say they are at or past the point of saturation. And the option to stop changing is not available to us. And so what do we do with so many active changes? Well, I would propose the only way to address so many changes in parallel is investing in building your organizational change capability. Awesome, so thank you for the feedback there. So what we're going to do is provide an analogy here. Change management applied to a single project. It's a bit like building a house. Change management applied to dozens or hundreds of projects at the same time, to have this organizational capability, is more like architecting the subdivision that each of the houses belong in. And while this is a very much an American subdivision, I don't know many people in America that strive to live in a place like this. You get the point that if we're going to have a great environment for multiple changes to happen at the same time, we've got to have a common language, a common way of working, a common approach to be able to address these changes. And so to build an organizational change capability means we've got to put intention and structure behind how we architect our neighborhood, how we set it up for success. And so it's not just about building one house, it's about building the entire neighborhood at the same time. So this is the concept of change management at a project level. Enterprise change management is how do we do all of this in a common way across the organization, so architecting the subdivision, if this makes sense. Maybe the old-fashioned way. So hopefully that's the context of change management project versus an enterprise change capability. Now we're going to talk about what do leaders need to care about building a change capability. So we're big fans of Simon Sinek, the golden circle, you start with why. And I'm going to give you some of the most popular reasons why organizations are building their enterprise change capability. How many of your leaders say we need to be more agile, we need to have business agility as a strategic imperative? Right? Just because you say the words doesn't mean you get the outcomes. And so we see from a survey with PwC, 76% of CEOs said that the ability to adapt to change is a key source of competitive advantage. 9 of 10 executives in a McKinsey study said that organizational agility is critical and is only on the trend up. And then the Project Management Institute has also talked about organizational agility drives better performance, which drives increased competitive advantage. We also know that change saturation has serious consequences. As Eke said, it has individual consequences at the people level. It has project consequences, which happen in terms of delays and budget overruns. It also has organizational consequences. Oftentimes, this is around employee experience and engagement. And cynicism and skepticism can sink in. And once you lose your population of employees, it is really hard to get people back. And so when we stack change on top of change on top of change and don't address the people side, we have a lot of saturation, and that saturation has a lot of dire consequences. We also understand there's a compounding cumulative effect. And so if change management on one project is good, change management applied to many projects is going to be better. And so it's not just a single project, but if we can make this a norm of how we get changes done in the organization, we're going to have a much stronger outcome than if we do this just one project at a time. We also know from research, the greater change management maturity we have in an organization, the higher probability we have to deliver successful outcomes. And so here we have a 5-level maturity model. And if you go from level 1, and there's a lot of famous reports from McKinsey that says 2 out of 3 change or transformation efforts failed to deliver their intended outcomes. Well, our research data would say that's true if you're very low in your change maturity. But if you can grow your maturity over time, you can turn 1 out of 3 into a success to 2 out of 3 into a success. And so your probability of being successful with all of the concurrent changes goes way up as we build this muscle in the organization. We also need a common language for change. And I think this is one of the most powerful things available through the ADKAR model. The simplicity is where a lot of the magic lives here. And if we look at other successful parts of the organization, we say, how do we report on our financials at the end of the month? Well, we have a process and a common language and a set of tools to that. How do we onboard a new customer? There we also have a process and a set of tools we use. If we say, well, how do we drive change in the organization? Most organizations don't have a common language, a process, and a set of tools. And so by creating this, it's going to give us a much stronger capability. And it means we don't always need to rely on the change management specialist, the practitioner, to drive all of the changes. If we can build a common language from the top of the organization to the front line, we've got a much stronger probability of being successful with the everyday changes we face, as well as the big transformations that we try and drive. And then the last piece of this is every organization is searching for a new source of competitive advantage. And outchanging the competition, I would propose, is one of the only sources of competitive advantage that can't be copied. We can copy the same technology and buy the same software as our competitors. We can deploy the same types of ERP systems in the organization, but what we can't copy is an organizational capability in a common way and a common language to make change successful. And so we see organizations that invest in this capability outperform their competition. One example I would point to is Microsoft. Microsoft came to us in 2014 and said, we're completely changing our business model. No longer do we charge the client by installing the software. We're charging the client by how much they use the software. And so that means adoption is one of the critical components for them to get value and the retention that they're looking for and the expansions they look for. So Microsoft has invested in certifying more than 6,000 of their professional services organization on the Prosci methodology. And when they deploy their technology with the biggest customers in the world, it is often powered by Prosci to drive adoption. They also have scale that a lot of other organizations don't. And so they've studied what happens when you deploy Microsoft technology without the focus on adoption, and how does that compare to when you deploy Microsoft technology with a focus on adoption. 450% return on investment compared to the group that doesn't focus on adoption. And so they've got hard empirical evidence on this. We also have seen Microsoft soar through the pandemic when a lot of organizations were really challenged. And if you look at their stock price and their overall performance across the last 10 years, they would credit their investment in building an organizational change capability as one of the key differentiators for them against a lot of the other technology players that offer common or similar and oftentimes lower cost alternatives. And so the source of competitive advantage is also, in my eyes, where we're going to derive that business agility that a lot of the leadership talks about. And it takes more than talk, right? It takes action, it takes intention, it takes resources. I joke, if you won't give me resources, then I need people and budget, right? These need to have human beings that have time in their diaries to be able to do this work. It's not enough to talk about it. You really need to invest in it. And we challenge leaders all the time. You need to walk the talk. If you say you want business agility as a competitive advantage, what are you doing to invest to make that a reality? And speeches aren't enough. It takes intention, methodology, giving people the tools and resources they need. So these are some of the whys for building an organizational change capability that we hear from many organizations across the world. I would love to hear from you which of these whys resonates most inside of your organization. So again, the pullev.com/adkar, and you can drop a pin on each or any of the 6 that resonates most with you. So we see a lot on change maturity and portfolio success rate. I was in a meeting this morning. We talked about how do we validate the return on investment from all the effort we put into change management. Well, we know that growing the change maturity is going to deliver more successful outcomes. It's interesting. We've got a healthy spread here, right? There's not one horse that is clearly going to win this race. I think one of the takeaways here is we need to talk about why in multiple different angles. One reason is not going to be enough to get all of our leaders on board. We need to go at this from a variety of different perspectives, and sometimes the one that resonates best for us isn't always the one that resonates best with our audience. And so using the language that resonates best with our audience is one of the key takeaways. When we're talking to senior leaders, Jeff Hyatt, our founder, said leaders speak 3 languages. They speak finance, finance, and finance. And so if we come and talk to leaders about stakeholder management and communication plans and resistance management, we're not speaking their language. And so one of the things we want to do as we bring this forward and engage with our leaders is put it into terms that resonate with them, not necessarily with us just as change practitioners. Last thing I'll say is we've got a great webinar, and we'll distribute this as part of the follow-up that talks about how do you build a compelling why to inspire action, and this gives us a balanced approach. We need the stories, we need the logic, which is a lot of where Prosci has strength from a research perspective, but the facts and data aren't enough. We've also got to tap into the emotion, and if we can do this in a way that's visual, each of these 4 quadrants will help amplify the value of the why that we bring. And so, again, a really nice webinar we'll send around as part of the follow-up that goes deeper into this concept. But I see a lot of individuals trying to get their organizations on board with change management, and they go with one message, and they try and beat the drum the same in every space, and they're not adapting the message to match the needs of the audience. And so a compelling why will help us if we can address each of these 4 quadrants. I'll punch this around the circle. Okay, so we've talked about the difference between change management at a project and building an enterprise capability. We've tried to give you 6 reasons why building a change capability can be a source of competitive advantage. Now we're going to talk about some of the how, a framework and some tactics to help us with this journey. So we've got where we are today. So this is us in the bottom. We've got where we want to go, which is the green, and we've got this challenging sort of transition in front of us. And there's no way we can go from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the biggest mountain without having leadership in place, without leadership assigning the resources we need, without putting intention and structure behind this. So a strong desire is not enough. We've got to make the investment in this, and I coach leaders all the time. You will get out of change management what you're willing to put into change management. Which means if you ask a few people to do this off the corner of their desk, you're unlikely to get the breakthrough outcomes that you would expect. If you dedicate resources, we know from research, full-time dedicated resources produce much better outcomes than asking people to do this on top of their day job. It's also very easy to say, I sent a lot of people to training. Training in and of itself doesn't produce the outcomes either. We've got to give people the space to apply what they learned, the encouragement, sometimes the accountability as well, so we can measure how much are we getting from the investment we've made at the individual level. But training alone is not a magic solution to get to change outcomes. And so we see a lot of organizations, they go with what I call spray and pray, right? Put some people in class and then cut them loose and we see what happens. And then they get frustrated in 1 year, where are my results? Well, I said you had no plan to deliver results. You had plans for the jump off point, but you didn't have plans for what happens next. And so anyone investing in change management training, I would strongly encourage you to set up a clear expectation of what happens after you leave the training to apply what you learned to get to the outcome. And I have a great frustration when I hear organizations say, well, we trained a lot of people on the Prosci method, it doesn't work here. I say, time out. What did you do to make it work? Who did you give time available? Who did you apply and connect to the projects or the transformation initiatives you have going on? And that's where it starts to get a little dicey. You say, well, I didn't give anyone extra time. I didn't assign anyone to specific projects. These are the steps we need to take to get to the outcomes. So we have this 5-level maturity model, and it starts with ad hoc or absent, and almost every organization needs to have a starting point. And so if you're not doing a lot of formal structured change management, you're not alone. But we know there is a repeatable journey you can take. You go from ad hoc or absent to isolated projects. And so when you're just getting started, you can't tackle the entire change portfolio. You really need to be focused. And so we start talking about how do we find demonstration projects so we can put wins on the board. If you have 100 active changes, can we focus on 3 or 4 and demonstrate the benefit, because every organization will have resistors and skeptics. And the easiest way to get past the skeptics is not fancy PowerPoint slides, it's let them taste the difference in the outcomes that are delivered when we do this work well. We also understand when we get to multiple projects, this is where the saturation starts to become real, and we've got to take a more intentional approach about managing change at the portfolio level, not just the project level. And if we want to get to world class, we've got to establish common norms and ways of working in the standards, and then building this competency in every role in the organization, not just isolated to the practitioners, the specialists. We need our people leaders on top of impacted groups to understand their role. We need the frontline team members to have a vocabulary so we don't say I love the change or I hate the change. They can have a more robust discussion to say I don't have enough awareness, or my awareness and desire is strong, I don't have the knowledge or the ability I need. Now we've got a much easier approach to address the gaps in this than yes or no, I love it or I hate it. And so we can measure this then. You can see we do a baseline with every client when we first get started that says, what is your current state maturity when we're jumping off? And we have 5 different capability areas that we measure this through. And then each year we say, well, how much progress are we making? And we can start to see what's the goal for the first year, where are we going to put the investment? And then how do we progress this with structure and intention as opposed to close your eyes and hope for a better outcome? And then we can set a multi-year goal so we've got an understanding. What's that tallest mountain we want to get to? And how do we go on the journey to get there? And many times sprinting up the steepest face is not the best path. Also, if anyone's been in this for many years, it is not linear at all. It is oftentimes 2 steps forward, 1 step to the side, a step back before I can rechart my course. And so change is a journey that has a lot of unexpected changes along it. And so for anyone that's going down this path, I would encourage you to have your leadership think of this as a multi-year investment. It's not just about the projects of today. It's about understanding if we can build this capability in the organization, it's something like an evergreen thing we can apply to everyday changes as well as the big transformations we face. So now another poll. I would love to get feedback from you. How would you rate the current level of maturity inside of your organization on the 5-level scale? So starting at ad hoc or absent, going all the way up to an organizational competency. Okay, I love to see the mix here, and there is often a misperception that in America we are the most mature market when it comes to building change capabilities. We know from research data that that's not necessarily true, and it's great to see such a broad spectrum here. We've got a number of people just getting started, but we have quite a high number saying we're at level 3 or at level 4 in this maturity scale. And so that says that this isn't just the beginner's club. We've got some good experience in the room. So this is what the research data will say. Across almost 2,000 participants in our latest study, you can see that the most common answer is level 2, which is we're just getting started with isolated projects, right? And so this to me says the discipline of change management is still very much on the rise, but we haven't found a steady state yet. The fact that we have a sold out room here is another indication of the enthusiasm for building this capability. And so it's great to see. But for me, there's several years, maybe even a few decades in front of us for continued innovation in this space and to continue to grow what is what I believe to be a real source of competitive advantage. So we have 5 capability areas in which we're able to measure your change management maturity, and this gives us practical, actionable steps we can take. And so the first one here is around leadership. And leadership is all about having the right sponsor for the capability. It's about finding the funding for the capability. It's about giving us the resources we need to get started, helping us pick the right priority change initiatives to demonstrate the value. Right? We also know leadership and active and visible sponsorship is the #1 predictor for change success. So if you're building an organizational change capability, a best practice is to treat this as a change in and of itself, which means we need to put some kind of project plan in place. We need to have a change management plan in place on top of this, because for most organizations, when you say it's time to build a change capability, they don't have a solid understanding of what it means or the effort it takes, right? Application is next. You only get benefits from what you apply the methodology to. And so I see a lot of organizations focus on training, but not on application. And application is how we deliver the return on investment. And so again, before you put people into the classroom, create a shared expectation with the leaders on the projects. What are these people that we're investing in training expected to do when they leave to help us deliver outcomes? Because training by itself might make people happy and have a skill set that's more marketable. But if I'm a leader in an organization and I want to invest tens or hundreds of thousands of euros in my capability, I need to expect a return on that investment. The project is the delivery mechanism for the return on investment. And so making sure our change practitioners are tied to projects before they come to class is absolutely a recommendation and a best practice. So next on the list, we have competencies. This is the capability and skills we need to develop. And if we do this work the right way, we don't try and train everyone in change management. We use the projects we select to identify what are the team members that need to have the capabilities. And so if I'm deploying an ERP system, well, then I know I need to have my technology team trained up on this, but I also need to have the business process team and a lot of the people that have to adopt and use the technology. So you use the change to identify who are the sponsors of this change, who are the people managers responsible for implementing the change with all of the impacted employees, and focus the competencies around those who need it in more of a just-in-time manner. So even though we make a lot of our money in the classroom, we don't recommend training everyone in the organization for the sake of training. We want to have the projects determine who is appropriate to be targeted for this new competency. Standardization is often about where is this going to live in the organization? And a lot of companies don't have a plan for this. Some of the best have a very intentional plan to say we're going to set up an infrastructure or a governance system, whether you call it a change management office or a center of excellence. We see organizations really thrive when they put intention around where this is going to live. If we just start training people and see what happens, we're playing reactive change management planning. We propose to be much more proactive in your plan. I'll give you a story. One of our big clients on a global basis is Mars. When they first started, they said, we don't have a change management office, but we know that the enthusiasm, the energy for this is coming out of the HR function. In the first 2 years, they said HR is where it lives today. HR can't be where this lives in the future. So they intentionally set up a center of excellence, and they have many other centers of excellence, but they created a very small team, 4 people for a large global organization with more than 140,000 employees. Wasn't a big resource plan, but it was enough to have the standardization and the consistency they needed. So when you needed change management support, or you needed guidance, or you needed access to consulting, the center of excellence didn't give you the resource, but they helped you identify which are the right resources. And so there are many examples and other ways of doing this, but I would suggest you need to figure out what's the one that works best for your organization, and the way it starts doesn't need to be the way it finishes. So in the Mars story, it was very much an HR starting point, and then turned into a transformation office home where the center of excellence lives. And so I would also encourage you to stay flexible, and you're going to need to follow the energy in the organization as opposed to just writing down a plan and then never deviating from the plan. Then the last piece of this is around socialization. So how do we create change management as an expectation in the organization? It's never going to happen if we're seen as something like the fifth wheel on the car. We want to integrate change management into many other complementary disciplines to make us the turbo engine inside the car. And so common integration points are with project management office, where if you're driving lots of projects through a PMO, change management and project management should zip together and work in concert with each other. We see other disciplines like design thinking come to the table, like strategy deployment, Lean and Six Sigma and process improvement are natural integration points, and so we don't do change management in isolation. We integrate this work where changes are initiated across the organization. So my proposal to you is it's not okay just to address one of the 5 wedges. And we see a lot of organizations take a lopsided approach where they say, we're going to be all about training, but not about the project element of this. And so that's more the competencies than the application. My suggestion would be to find tactics in each of the 5 quadrants and take a balanced approach. So you're addressing not just one element, but you're taking a holistic approach to make sure we're setting up for success. It also doesn't mean when you start in week 1 or month 1 or year 1, it needs to look the same. And so what we do with clients that are building this maturity over time is each year we come in and remeasure what's your current maturity look like. And we say, which of the 5 quadrants do we need to pull as a lever more? Which one do we maybe need to pull as a lever less? And so again, it's a journey that takes many twists and turns. We need to stay flexible. But just going at one of these quadrants without addressing the others can get you in trouble quickly. And again, I would encourage you, it's not all about the training. It's about taking training and learning and turning it into doing, the action, going from knowledge in ADKAR to ability in ADKAR. Ability is where we get the greatest return on investment. So making sure we take a balanced approach that gets leaders involved, help us pick the right projects, have the projects drive who needs to have the capabilities, and then create enough standardization and socialization underneath this to fit your needs. So here's a couple of examples of best practices that we've gathered from some early adopters. So when this is level 1, it's ad hoc or absent, we need to get started. And so we need to identify a sponsor and ideally help address the mindset of the sponsor. It's not about giving the sponsor all of the tools, it's about giving them a different way to think about the people side of change, that balanced approach between the technical side and the people side, and an understanding of a lot of your benefit is going to be adoption dependent. It's not enough just to install the technology. If people don't use the technology, we don't get any of the outcomes. And so I love this question of how much of the project benefits that you're sponsoring are tied to adoption versus tied to installation. And most of the time we get 50%, 60%, 80%, sometimes 100%. The next one is the killer question. What are you as a sponsor willing to do about 80% of your benefits that are dependent on adoption of the solution, not just installing the solution, right? So now we've made it a sponsor obligation, not a change practitioner obligation. And so we got to find a sponsor to give us access to resources to get started. So I'm a big believer of follow the energy in the early days. It might not be the ideal solution, but it's the right solution to get started, and we can always evolve over time. Next, as we climb maturity into isolated projects, here's where we need to be more intentional. So we need to select projects that have a strong people dependency. Not every change needs as much change management. And so we really want to find the ones that can deliver success in a short amount of time and that are dependent on adoption. So when the pandemic came and we had this office that no one would go to, we changed the lighting. So anyone that walks in a room, the lights kick on. When you walk out of the room, the lights turn off. That has almost zero people dependency. We also implemented a more evolved recycling program. And now we have 4 bins, and you have to separate your rubbish and put it in the right bin. That has a huge people dependency, right? And so finding the types of changes that have a heavy people dependency to get started is a big recommendation. Doing the training in a role-based way, we don't want to treat everyone the same. We know from research sponsors need a different capability than people managers do, which is different again than the change specialists, the practitioners. And so being intentional about developing the right people in the right role is definitely a recommendation. And if we get to isolated projects, it's time to start building a plan for how is this going to work on a larger scale. If we don't have a plan, we have a low chance of getting to the outcome we expect. And then get some wins on the board. I always say that you can't tell me how good it's going to be. You need to show the organization how it feels different. And the best way to do that is to find a change that's scoped to a reasonable level that can deliver outcomes in weeks or months, not years. So we have one client that says, okay, we're doing a big 5-year SAP implementation. This is going to be the first proof of concept for change management. I say, okay, we don't have a choice to say no because it's the #1 most important change across the organization, but what else can we focus on that's going to put a win on the board in 3 months or 6 months, because we don't have 5 years before the jury is going to come back and say no thank you. So finding the changes where we can get some quick wins is definitely a recommendation in the isolated project zone. And then multiple projects. This is where we need to take more of that portfolio view, and this is where this change saturation and collision is something we can start to map and manage more intentionally. I would also argue you don't start here. You don't start with portfolio management for change if you don't have the level of maturity. You need to get some wins on the board, develop some base level capabilities before it's going to make sense to start mapping the broad portfolios of change. But here we need to set up for success and have clear sponsors and practitioners assigned to our most important changes. I'm always surprised how many organizations don't have a linear relationship for one project, one sponsor, one practitioner. If it's everyone's responsibility, it turns into no one's responsibility. And so I'm a big believer on heavy dose of accountability with clear expectations and strong resource alignment. And again, you can see establish the plan to build a broader capability is in level 2. It's also in level 3. If you're able to climb to level 3 and you don't have a plan, this is where you can get into a danger zone and not be ready for the questions and some of the enthusiasm. Typically level 1 and level 2, we're pushing our way in. When we get to level 3, this is where pull starts to be quite strong. And if we don't have a plan to address the strong demand that's going to come, it can overwhelm us and often sub-optimize how we allocate our resources. So a couple of other lessons learned from the trenches. First is align with your culture. If your culture is very much decentralized, please don't make change management the guinea pig to try and do a big centralized approach, right? So if your culture has a way of working, let's align to that way and not try and break the mold with change management as the guinea pig. We need to target these initial demonstration projects and select them very carefully. If we pick the wrong changes to demonstrate success, we're not going to have the opportunity to continue to climb the capability ladder. And every organization has skeptics around change management. We need to get these proof points on the board and put quick wins in as fast as possible. I also like this, build a network of change champions. It doesn't mean everyone in the organization needs to go to formal training to be a change champion. This is where we're trying to spread a mindset on the importance of adoption and usage, not just installing change. And I think it takes a village to make this successful. Invite as many people to the village as early as possible, and then help them by enabling them with access to resources. If any of you have no budget for change management, Prosci gives away more research and more tools and more templates than any firm I've ever seen. And so you go to prosci.com/downloads, you can build an entire change practice off the free things that are available there. I still encourage you to talk to our friends at Eezy Flow and Change Partners, but also there's lots and lots of ways to get people engaged without having to spend money. And then follow the energy of the early adopters. We have a love-hate relationship with HR because many times HR holds the training budget, but they don't have a solid understanding of the most important changes in the organization. If HR is where the energy is to get started, then HR becomes our friend. If IT is where the energy is to get started, then IT becomes our friend. Even if it's not where we want to live forever, we need to follow the energy in the early days because it doesn't help to push rope uphill against a sponsor who's not willing to engage with us. And so where you find energy, start there and expand out. We also know from research, HR and IT were the two most common places where change management started. In our 2023 best practices study, Strategy and Transformation Office is now the #1 place for change management as a home base. And so it means where you start doesn't mean that's where you have to end the journey. Yeah. And then the last one is treat this as a change in and of itself. If you want to build a change-capable organization, that's not going to happen for free. It's not going to happen by accident. It takes structure and intention to make this work. And so it's the only change where as a change group, you would own the technical side and the people side, right? But have a technical side plan. Build a project plan that has milestones and deliverables so you can manage this as a project just like you would any other project, because it is a change for the organization, and not treating it as a change sets us up for some challenges. All right, so in closing, who wants change? Well, everyone can tell you all the things that are going wrong in the organization, right? Well, who wants to change is a very different story, right? I can point at all of the changes, but it doesn't mean that I want to be the one making the change. And then the last one here is who wants to lead the change? Well, this is a discipline that is not for the faint at heart. There are trade-offs around every corner. We need a heavy dose of resilience, but I would argue that this is work that has real meaningful impact on employees, on projects, and on organizations. And so again, you'll get out of change management what you're willing to invest in it. But if you try and do this with no investment and ask people to do it off the corner of their desk, it doesn't produce the outcomes that you would expect. So I want to say a great big thank you very much for having me in today. I would love to welcome it up any questions you'd like to address. Thank you.
So now is your chance. The man is here, so go ahead. Any questions you have?
And also virtually online, you can ask questions, and they will be heard in here. So I can do the starting question.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'm really curious, talking to many leaders and working with many organizations, is just how do you get out of this cycle of short-term, view, cycle of constant putting fires down? So what's your advice to the leaders and executives, how to really stop and think more big strategy, how we change, besides what you already shared, but how to really stop?
Well, it's quite challenging to put the hose down and focus on fire prevention when the fire is at your feet, right? And it is also quite exhausting if all day, every day, you pick up the hose and put the fire at your feet. And so I think we need to zoom out and say, how do we be more proactive in addressing this as opposed to only reactive? And if you're in an organization managing change in a reactive way, you're typically spending a lot more money, a lot more time, and a lot more energy than is necessary. And so I always coach leaders, you might have to be reactive in some part, but how can you also be more proactive to address this? Because if all you are is going to be a firefighter, every day there's a new fire to put out. If we're not focusing on preventing the fires, it's going to be this perpetual cycle. And so maybe it's only 15 or 20% of your effort that goes to proactive because you do have so many fires. But if you don't invest anything proactively, you're never going to get out of reactive mode. And the other thing is you need to zoom out and say, what is sustainable here? Are we going to continue to get by with the 11th hour hero maneuver that's how we always get projects done? Sometimes we reward the wrong behaviors. We need to start looking at how do we reward the people that are being more proactive, that are building a plan, that are providing more transparency into the challenges and to the opportunities that sit in front of us, and stop always rewarding the one that stays up all night to do the heroic move at the very last hour to make the project not a failure, right? And so I think a small dose of proactive effort goes a long way and keeps us out of spending a multiplier in the reactive mode.
Anything?
What's in your mind?
Yeah.
I like the idea of how you get people to embrace the change.
Yeah, please take the mic so
Yeah.
everyone virtually will.
I'll say again.
Thank you.
I like the idea when you talked about how to make the people to embrace the change, and actually you might have added something already, that being proactive, but I guess it would take also a lot of listening and being present in the early stages.
Yeah, we have communication plan as one of the major ways we help bring people through their ad card journey. And far too many communication plans are really telling plans. It's not a listening part. We don't close the loop and capture the feedback. And so I think there are opportunities to have a lot more active engagement a lot earlier. I don't know many people that like to be forced to change. I think it's much more probable we're going to get to the right outcome if we can engage the people in shaping the change. And so we saw this from, we did a study called Top Contributors to Change Success in a Post-Pandemic World. And one of the biggest takeaways from this was more employee engagement much earlier in the process. And so we don't say the change is fully baked, now I drop it on your desk. We say, come with me and let's put the dough together and do all the raw ingredients together. And so I think getting employees involved much earlier is definitely something we would recommend. But it takes some courage, because sometimes you don't have all the answers the employees are going to ask questions about, especially if you're working in more of an agile way. And I still think you're going to get better results when you involve people earlier than you wait till the thing is done. At the end, you have the grand unveiling. The grand unveiling almost never works inside my organization. And I don't see this work well in many of our client organizations either. And so I think the transparency builds trust as well. And where you have trust, you oftentimes get a little bit more willingness to deal with the margin for error. Well, this didn't work exactly like I planned, but I trust my leader because they've been transparent and I know where we're going next. And so I do think getting employees involved much earlier in the journey than feels comfortable is something we recommend. Thank you for the question. Please.
Thank you for your presentations. I'm Juho Ramakkanimi from Chamber of Commerce. As you said, all the management is basically change management. How you manage the change kind of defines whether it's survival or adaptation or putting your strategy in action in the end of the day. You mentioned in the beginning that the change management and strategy, they are kind of synonyms or the same things, but isn't the strategy more of a compass for the change in the end of the day?
I always say change management, we're looking for the Academy Award for the best supporting actor, never the lead actor. So the strategy is the lead actor. The technology deployment is the lead actor, the number one thing. We're looking to be the nice complement to this. So you're going to pay for change whether you like it or not. If we can do this in a proactive manner, we can take a lot of friction out of the process. But it's never about change management. It's about making the change successful. And I see some organizations try and make it too much about the change manager or the change management community and not about producing the outcomes of the major changes we're focusing on. And innovation is the same, right? Similar to strategy. I've never met an innovation sort of implementation that doesn't involve lots of change. And so I think embedding us where the changes are happening, but not trying to be the star, trying to have sort of the prize for the best supporting actor is something we see that works quite well. But it takes some humility as well. Far too often leaders try and bang the chest and make it about me. We want to make it about the people that need to adopt the change, not about the change community, if this makes sense.
Excellent. Hey, before we will have our short break, we have one question more from the online audience, and then I noticed that there was also from the front one more question to come. So, from our virtual versions, people and participants, one person is asking, in the people part, there is a huge trend on discussing and researching the role of feelings and emotions in getting people truly part of the change. What are your thoughts about this part?
Yeah, so we know from research that the better change maturity has a direct correlation to employee engagement. I also say at Prosci, we are focused on producing outcomes, not producing feelings. And so if you have a positive feeling about the change, that's a nice positive consequence, but that's not the target. The target is how do we get adoption and usage to produce measurable outcomes? And a lot of times that means bringing people on the journey with us and making sure they're equipped and supported. And so I don't want to say we're intentionally working against the feelings, but I wouldn't call the feelings the primary driver for our work. Our primary driver needs to be adoption and usage to deliver return on investment. And if we do that well, oftentimes we get positive emotional feedback. But yeah, it's not, we don't do change management to give hugs and sing songs at the end of the day. We invest in this because it needs to deliver a return.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question online.
And one more question before.
Sorry. Okay, so you said something like don't use change as a guinea pig in a distributed culture or organization, didn't you? Yeah. So
if you have a centralized structure,
yeah.
Centralized change management. You have decentralized structure, decentralized change management, but don't try and go against the grain,
Exactly.
if this makes sense.
So
Yeah.
perhaps my question was that, okay, so what would this, a small example, what would this decentralized change management mean in practice?
Yeah, so I'll give you
tricks.
Yeah, so I'm working with a group in France tomorrow on this, where the power sits in the regions, not in the center. And so what we decide is we're going to have a common set of guidelines, which we all commit to. So each project needs to have a sponsor. We're going to invest in putting a change practitioner on our projects. But which project you select the regions decide this. We don't dictate from the center. And so a lot of the benefits accumulation will happen in the regions, and so we give them more autonomy, but we agree on a common language and a way of working and at least some basic ground rules. And so I find this works well because you can't tell everyone, like, so from America, the loud Americans are coming. We hear this all over the place, especially inside my organization where we're now global and people say, yeah, but that's not how we do it in Australia or not how we do it in Brazil. We do it our way. And so we need to give the distributed model the respect it deserves and say we will decide on a few things that we hold as common practice, but we let a lot of the decision making of which changes, which people do we resource the changes with, how many people do we develop, what roles do we develop, that would happen in the distributed fashion. And I'll give you an example from Mars as one, where some regions went gangbusters and trained lots and lots of people. Others said, I wait and see, and slowly went behind some of the early success. And so if we said everyone had to do it one way, there's no way that would work in the federated model that they had. But by giving the option to join us, it gave people sort of the feeling that it's my decision. I'm not being forced by corporate to do this. And so, yeah, I've also seen this the other way, where it's a big centralized organization and we centralize the resources, and then you have to work hard to get resources assigned to your project, but that aligns with how the organization competes for resources already, and so it's consistent with their ways of working. But my big ask is don't use change management as the first time to go the other way. If it's centralized, have change management centralized. If the power structure is decentralized, then I would suggest we put strong autonomy at the unit level, not at the center.
Okay, I'm Katri Pirtola from Kone, and my question to you is about, you were mentioning about the competitive advantage and how to be able to have that, and at the same time we saw that it's most of the people felt that they are in the second level. So could you maybe share us like who are some of those really that are able to outperform now in the large scale companies worldwide, given your large experience with Prosci and working with different companies?
Yeah, so Microsoft stands out just because they've been so intentional and have invested so broadly in this. And if you look at their stock performance against all of their peers, they're way above in their performance. And I bring some others forward. So we have some government agencies in the US, which you would not expect to be early adopters, but the state of Washington has really embedded this in 70 different agencies where if you're doing change management, you're gonna use the Prosci approach. And not every single one of the agencies does it the same way, but they have a common language and a lot of their employees jump between agencies. And so they've talked about how it enables employee mobility without having the friction. One other one we could point to that's maybe a little bit more US-centric, but one of our cable companies that provides the internet and the TV, they were the #1 most hated company in the country, like something like 6 years running, and they invested a ton of energy and effort across many years in change management. They're not #1 anymore, they're maybe number 6 or 7 on the list, but for them that was a really big getting out of the basement kind of experience. And so, and they credit a lot the common language they have for making change. They've also got a field service group out, technicians all over the place that don't have computers and don't have access to the standard trainings that some organizations do. So they've been very creative about how they brought all of their team members across the entire footprint into change management. Some just a little bit in, some very deep in. But if you were to ask a field technician in this 130,000 person organization, what do you know about change management? They'll say something about ADKAR. Maybe I can't stand ADKAR, but they also know that ADKAR is the common language for change they use. And so it's an example of one where their definition of success would not be the same way we would have defined success, but they were quite proud of the fact that they're not where they used to be, and they give the change capability a lot of credit for that. But it's another example where federated. The West Division looks very different than the East Division, looks different than the Northeast. And so it's one where I think, yeah, letting the units do it the way it works best in the unit really paid dividends for them.
Okay, so thank you, Scott. Thank you, audience. Good questions indeed, and we will continue in, say, 15 minutes, 16 minutes with our panel discussion, and you are now welcome to have something to eat because you have been sitting here. Now it's time to have something. And we will continue at noon. Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, can you hear me? You can't? Yeah, okay, time to continue with our panel. And before that, a couple of practicalities. First of all, thank you for appreciating our main speaker today and not moving. And I'm happy to see that now you are eating, not anymore, just hungry sitting there. But
the saying is that angry man is a hungry man.
Hungry. Okay, right. Anyway, yeah, you are free to move. Let's make it informal during the panel. So there's also some dessert served, so feel free to grab that too. And we will end the session at 1 o'clock. But also after that, you are welcome to join us for some networking here. So there's no hurry to go away after 1 o'clock. You are welcome to stay for a while and talk with our panelists and with each other. So, but yeah, our panel. So let's start, Eke.
Yeah, so you're a great audience, not like an average audience at all. So let's make it interactive in a real casino style. So be prepared. I'm not the only guy asking questions here. It will be your event. But I want to say first that Prosci is about research as well, and has for 25 years studied great leaders, great organizations globally, what they do about change management. That's good and unique and valuable to know about. So today we have a chance to hear from 3 great practitioners, plus of course Scott, last but not least, about their organization's journeys and stories. And one thing you heard from Scott's presentation was that there is no one way of doing this, increasing change capability. So many different paths can take us to the success. But what's key, I liked it in his keynote, is it always takes intent and good leadership. So let's hear it from the leaders. We have Anna-Leena, we have Jarmo, Lelia, and last but not least, Scott. And maybe let's give them first a good applause for being here. So the brave leaders, yeah. And my first question to you actually will be, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you excited about change, or how you learned the importance of change? Starting with you.
Yeah, I heard about change management actually and got to interact with it was 20 years ago. I was working on an operating model change at Sandvik, where I worked at the time. We had quite a huge operating model change with a lot of reorganization. And we were partnering up with an external provider, and they brought in change management. And then I realized, okay, this is the missing piece that I've really been missing for a long time. And that got me so curious. So in all my projects and transformations after that, I brought in change management. And I could say that was a key success for that operating model change. It really made it really work. My role at the time was not to lead the change management part. It was to lead, well, as the transformation lead, the program manager for that change. So that was very short how I got introduced to change management. So, yeah, it was the start of a journey. And I also followed the development around in other companies. It wasn't so well known at the time. It was until 2014, I think, I sort of got change management in the title. Before I did it, but it was more like in other roles. So it says something about the development as well. Regarding.
Right. Jarmo, what's your story?
Yeah. If I continue, I've been now in Metsä Group roughly 27 years, so I have a lot of experience from the past, seeing both good change management and very poor change management. And I always look the world in a way that if you consider, imagine in your front of your triangle, you can easily say that there are people, there are processes, there are tools and data, which all has to be in sync in order to be successful in any kind of change you made. And having an information technology background and leading quite a few projects during already on that time, I would say that it's the past experience has clearly shown that it's all about people who made the change at the end of the day. And of course, that is at the learning curve. I would say that during these 27 years, there has been a lot of change management. Perhaps the challenges have been not that systematic, not that clear, and the communication part has been partly of training people, and that's about it, not communicating at all. And I'm a strong believer of people management and change management part of that, which has to be in sync with the project management itself.
So it's good to hear from a tech guy that it's all about people. I like your line. Thank you. So Lelia, what's your story? What got you engaged in this?
Yeah. Hello, I'm your friend from HR, as Scott said. So I'm the People Operations Director at CLIA. So we help to redefine how companies interact with their customers. And I have been privileged to see and help to grow 3 different unicorn companies. So starting with Skype, then Pipedrive, where a lot of my change management experience comes from as well, and then now CLIA. And actually, when I switched from Skype to Pipedrive, and now today I realized that Microsoft started to use Prosci about the same time when I stayed at home with my second baby. So I missed this training there. But I still got to know about all this great tool set. And I realized that when I joined another startup, Pipedrive at that time, that when people are going through first time different changes, it's very difficult. But when you join a similar company, see the similar growth, it's so much easier to go through that. And then I was thinking, like, how can I help people actually proactively get to know how better to be part of the change, how to lead the change. And then in the same time, I was happy to be part of this kind of session as well, where I got to know that there are great toolkits, resources in place that will help you to do that in a professional way.
Great. What would you say, Scott? I don't remember asking you that question. What got you really see the value of change management?
Yeah, so I spent the better part of 15 years doing process improvement consulting, and we would go in and help organizations fix a process, and then we would come, and it would we would cut out lots of waste and say, okay, this process, if we keep it as it is for the next year, will create millions of euros of benefit. We'd come back 3 months later and everything was exactly back to where it started. And so I had so many process improvement initiatives where I was like, what a great success. And then we would leave and we would come back and do the audit after 3 months to do the benefit calculation, and there's no benefits to calculate. And so it wasn't because we did the map wrong or any of the tools wrong, it's because we didn't get the mindset of the people that you need to buy into this new way of working. We didn't bring them on an ad card journey. We tried to drop the answer on them at the end and say, this is how the perfect process runs. And that didn't produce the outcomes we expected. So I got tired of banging my head against the same wall and said there has to be a better way. And so that's what got me into change management.
So connection to the results and outcomes. Yeah, that's the key, another keyword.
Yeah.
Good one. Get ready for asking questions soon, but I will ask a couple more. So one of them is why. I think, starting with Simon Sinek, starting with the why is good to know. Like, what was your why in your organizations? Why you decided that this it's a good investment, we should start building change capability? I will first ask from, Anna-Lena.
Yeah, I didn't introduce me so properly, so maybe I should do that. Since a week back, I'm senior change management manager at Scania. I worked at Kone before, Volvo Trucks, and also Sandvik. And for one of those companies, I had a discussion with the president, and he said that, for me, without even me telling him before, he said that there is one clear why, and that is that I want a common terminology. Change is very difficult in itself. We cannot invent the wheel how we do change every time. That's not efficient. So let's use our resources more smart and effective. And let's have a common language and a common way of working with change. And And I was very happy with that. And then he said, I want to have my management team along. So then we brought in some help, and me and that external person did what Prosci calls a sponsor briefing. And I clearly remember that day when they exited that half day, the light was like, oh, I understand what change management is. This is what we've been missing to realize our benefits much faster. But it was because of the sponsor. He was very clear. He sat in the room the whole time. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't exit it. He was there. He was present. And, saying, why, this is why we're doing this. You better pay attention. So that was really like it was a moment I will never forget.
And it's a good story. It's really great when it happens in sponsors, full of sponsors, that spark. So well done.
We were like standing in line afterwards to talk to me, like, because he raised the question, so which project should we take first as a demonstration project? And they were like queuing up to me, like, I want mine. And then we had a discussion which had the best criteria. So
something you must have done really well, Anna-Lena.
Yeah, so. That was it's a good moment.
What's your story, Lelia? Oh, coming to Jarmo second. Yeah.
Okay. Why? So obviously, as a HR, I start from people side, like why it is important. And I start to analyze also like why change for me sometimes is much easier than for someone else. And I like the example of driving a car. When you know about the change, you are like a driver in the car. You can see the road ahead of you. It's very clear what bumps or what turns you need to take to get to the end, hopefully, yes. But at least you can also prepare yourself for the bump. But often the rest of the organization is on the back seat. They have like limited visibility. They don't have the toolkits. They don't understand what is happening, and then they need to react. You don't want them to react. Like the example of you sharing the firefighting. Often the firefighting is the result of not so great planning. So maybe when taking the step back and actually putting a good framework in place, and I like your example of same language, when we know where we are, help your people to get to the front seat. They don't need to be the driver, but they can be still on the front seat to see as much as you can see and make them part of the solution. But they can do it when they are more aware of the change management and how they can ask for more help and more information to be part of the change.
That's a great one. Really, how remember, change is about team effort, having all of those roles. As Scott said, also roles contribute. And when you can have them in the front seat, each and everyone in their role, that's where the change happens. I like the story. Jarmo, so... Yeah.
So if I want to answer why, actually, just the background information for you, that Metsä Group is a forest industry company which is owned by some 90,000 private forest owners, and we have been now conducting a program roughly 10 years for organic growth, and we have been making investment decisions roughly on a level of 7 billion euros, mainly in Finland and in Sweden. And now when we make our strategy round 21-22, we detected that, of course, there is a lot of going on. We have to have a better grip on the changes and make those changes happening as we have been planning to do. So our strategy program, which was decided until now, the strategy period lasts until 2030, is that we have a change management in our strategic cornerstones, that we have to do things better. And that is now the thing that we are now implementing. We have, of course, had change management also earlier, but not in such a systematic and disciplined way that we are targeting now. And of course, the main reasoning for this change management program is that we are able to do and create together with our 9,500 employees a more agile, more robust organization which can handle such an amount of organic growth at the same time when we are anyway facing quite a big and severe external challenges like Ukrainian war or pandemic in the past. So we try to focus on doing those things what we can impact our influence on internal development as professional as possible, and then be prepared for such drivers external which cannot be avoided.
Yeah, so connecting it to strategy, it sounds like, and really increasing internal control. So that's really good one.
Getting the ROI really
realized,
isn't it?
Okay, so maybe next question that I'm really curious to ask. Oh, you're fast eaters, actually. So quiet, no one's eating anymore. Maybe we have a question in the room, the audience already. Feel free. Not yet. Digesting time. Oh, yeah, Lucas.
Change Partners Lithuania. I know that everyone is looking for very nice success stories, but my key question is, so what is your biggest failure or learning point or mistake on the journey building ECM, Enterprise Change Management?
Okay, now it's getting interesting. It's the real truth. Starting with you, Anna-Lena, yeah?
Yeah, I smiled when you asked that question, because there is so many learnings. I think one of the main learnings is in the area of sponsorship and how you but how do you drive that change to build the capability in the organization? So I cannot emphasize enough that you, of course, need to have a sponsor. But it's really my biggest learning is that, okay, you get the sponsor, that's great. You get the budget. Wow, I get the budget. It's like amazing. But you need to keep working with that sponsor. It's the consistency. It's like change management is an endurance sport. What do you say? Like you need to go for it for the long run, as Scott said before. So keep trying to try to remove the people that want to hinder you from meeting the sponsor. What kind of, there's always, no, let's not talk to the sponsor. They are so busy. So let's try to keep going at it. I think that's the most important learning for me. And don't give up, even if everyone tells you, you don't need to talk to them, or it's too often, or but you need to have that relationship going. I think that's the very biggest learning. And the second learning is to run it as a project. I mean, change management takes change management. And also there to not just do the nice plans in the beginning and get started, but actually keep at it for the long run. Else it will not be successful.
Great ones. Any others?
So if I continue, I would say that we started this or let's say we tried to start this systematic approach already roughly 2019, 2020, and we had a lot of people trained for Prosci model, for example. Of course, there was a pandemic which had a certain challenges when you develop things in the projects that people are now remotely working and so on. But I believe that the biggest challenge was that there was kind of a first enthusiasm that, hey, let's do change management. But there was practicalities missing, the things that how do they land to the daily work, meaning that the project has to be in place, the change management has to be, the model required some development, and so all of that was lacking. And then when we had a look of 21 December that, hey, what do we have on our hands? We said we see some handful of trained and enthusiastic people, but in the 9,500 people organizer, it's worth zero if it doesn't materialize in the practical work as a part of the projects that we are now running. And that was the launching pad for us that, hey, now we have to take a bit more systematic and disciplined approach on to get the next steps.
One thing I'll add is sponsors face a real challenge, and it's what I call the curse of knowledge. They're sometimes wrestling with the change for a week or a month or sometimes a year or more, and they think one email is going to get everyone to fast forward to exactly where they are, and this is just not practically how it works. And so being willing to talk to the sponsor and say, you understand exactly why, and you think it is so obvious that it's not time to talk about it. No one else understands at all why. And so just because you give the name of a fancy project title or you talk about the technology or the budget doesn't mean you explained why change is necessary. And so I think coming back, I've seen so many sponsors have a great start and then they just take their eye off the ball and go on to the next thing and they think, okay, my one moment was enough. And I think we've got to just be a lot more intentional about saying, I coach sponsors, when you've talked about why and so you're sick in your stomach, you're halfway there. Right? And so just every meeting, you cannot overdo the why because just because you build awareness doesn't mean you keep awareness. It is a snapshot in time where we do a lot of these measures, and sometimes awareness goes up, but awareness comes back down. And so I think keeping the sponsor focused on why now, what if we don't? And even if they've said it until they're sick in their stomach, it's still time to say it some more again and again. And so far too often we have to coach sponsors. Change is guaranteed, success is not. And you have the missing link between those two.
And maybe not to repeat the sponsor topic, which is already covered, but to twist maybe your question a little bit and say that I think we all have seen bad change, and that's super helpful because then you can also measure it much better when you manage it in a much better way. And I think building this capability in the organization and measuring over the time how you get better is like super helpful. So, and I think the research, what we were able to see today, this is all for your benefit, what will help you to sell the change management in your organization.
May I? Thanks for a good question, Lucas. Excellent. How about the benefits that you have seen from CM, from change management until now? So what are maybe the practical benefits, and have you seen them to be measurable also? So who would like to comment? Anything? Anyone?
I can start. I think maybe a more short-term benefit is that what I've seen is that when we try to build change management capability is that I continue on the sponsor topic because it's a favorite topic of mine, is that I can see that the sponsors of different initiatives, they get faster into their role. So they get faster out of the starting block when the change is coming. So what do I need to do from a people side? When should I do it? What should I ask for? So that's a benefit, lead time decrease, that's also gaining money. So, and also I can see that another benefit is on the human side, because we say that we do change management we want to realize the business benefits is the finance thing that Scott talked about. But it's also what journey do we want to put the people on in change? Do we want them to have a good experience, continue working for us? So I think that's a benefit that I've seen where we have gone through, for example, organizational changes that I've been driving, and actually people, they feel quite okay in the end. So it's like it's also a benefit, I think.
Yeah, I have a similar idea that at Pipedrive as well, we made sure that throughout the organization we have enough people who speak the same language. And obviously this didn't happen overnight. We did it also with small steps, with small pilot program, really sending their people who are currently or will be in the close future leading a change. And through that, we were able to see that actually the immediate benefit of the program. Don't do it as, mandatory training for all the managers who actually don't need to change anything at the moment, because then they don't see the benefit. Those programs are very practical. You actually need to take the program or the project you're working on, use all the templates. So actually, throughout this 1 or 2 days or 3 days, depending on what training you take, you already get big part of your work, preparation work done. So over about 4 years, a little bit more, we were able to train 50 people, both managers and employees who were the practitioners, and also about 100 people, employees and 100 managers, both for the manager workshop and for the employee workshop. And this really helped to make sure that we speak the same language. I think, knowing what ADKAR is and where I am there, like even if I'm leading the change, sometimes I'm, having a trouble with some of those stages and realizing it, like, I think it's super important. Maybe another example, like personal coaching is getting more and more popular, You could read a book as well, self-help books are there like hundreds of them, but why it helps if you actually go to the personal coaches, because they can ask the right questions what maybe you are not ready to ask yourself. And with change management, like toolkits where you have like all the templates ready, like I don't like to build PowerPoints. There are like 100 slides ready for you. You just can take it and build your own project based on that. So I really love it.
Scott, any advice on measuring the benefits of change management?
Yeah, so I see so many organizations, they only try and measure the benefits of change management contribution at the end of the project. And the common thing I hear is, oh, we would have got that benefit anyway. And so what we need to do is in the beginning of the project, say, what are our benefits and how much you're tied to adoption? And we get an order of magnitude, say it's 50% or 75%, but we get some kind of measure. And in the beginning, then we can use this as a mantra. So the first client, we did this change management ROI calculation, and we showed it to the sponsor. He said, I went through your program, I've heard all these lectures, none of it made any sense to me. But when you told me 75% of the project that I'm already sponsoring is tied to adoption, now this became my number one priority. And then the change manager, he said, anytime you want to come to my office, remind me you're here to capture the 75% of my benefits that are tied to the people side. And it completely changed his lens. And it wasn't because he went through trainings, it was because we took his change and we measured what are the benefits, and we said, how much of that benefit do you get if you install? How much of the benefit do you get if it gets adopted? And we made it very real for him, but it was in a proactive way. It wasn't at the end of the project, because at the end it's too late, and the project manager is always going to say, because I did the right thing. If we can do in the beginning to say half your benefits are tied to adoption, well, that's how much of the prize we're chasing. And so therefore, we're not much more relevant. And so I see this ROI discussion, it's a losing game at the end of the project. If we do it proactively and we don't do it for the sponsor, we say, you take the pen. Here's the 5 lines in the benefit case. How much is this for adoption? How much is this for adoption? And they write down the numbers. We say, okay, some percentage of the total benefits is tied to the people side. That's what we're here to help you achieve. And it completely changed his lens. It wasn't the training or anything else. It was making the context of the change he was sponsoring come to life by analyzing it proactively. And he always, every time from then, said, no, this person's here for the 75% of my benefits case. They're number one on my agenda. But I think it's a challenge when we don't do this in the beginning and we try and come back afterwards and then we're arm wrestling to say, this was my part, this was your part. That's not going to be a value-added effort. If we can do it in the beginning, then we also earned our seat at the table. So why are you here? Well, I'm here to capture the 75% of my benefits that rely on adoption.
Questions from the audience? I'd really like to hear what are you thinking. What would you like to ask from those great practitioners? Just give you a moment to think about still. Yeah.
Just using the time as nobody else is asking the question. Scott, you mentioned that there's always a deal kind of change management is on the top what people usually are doing on the day-to-day job. So how to address and how to kind of break this vicious cycle? Because very often, especially when the maturity is not on the right level, you kind of don't have resources, kind of. Is there any recommendations from all of you how we can kind of sell that idea that it is required to allocate some extra hours for those people and it's not on top of the 12 hours workflow? Thank you.
Yeah, if I respond to that question, at least in our organization, there are multiple ways of influencing that topic. First of all, when you have a strategic program, it also means that you have a resourcing and funding in place that you can develop the organization for and reserve some resources for the change management. The other part is then the kind of a mandatory requirement that when we have a joint direct development portfolio for all projects, the project is not getting permissions to start if you don't have, like we have 4 classes, 2 and 1 being the most demanding from the change management person. If you don't have a change manager applied or you don't have a change plan in place, the program is not starting. It has to be there, like it has to be the resource planning, the budget, and all those preliminary requirements that has to be fulfilled, that you have some capability to success in your process. And in our thinking, the change management is not a separate entity to process management. It's part of the process management, actually embedded there. For certain process phases, you have to have a certain change management phases, and all this has to be synced together when project manager and change manager are coping and doing the planning together.
Yeah, that's a good tip, actually, thinking, what are the control gates for our projects? Having some defined requirements there, yeah?
I'll add on this. I think I talk about the glorious belly flop, which is the project that had all the spotlight on it, but it failed to deliver the outcomes. This is only a mistake if we don't take the lessons learned from this. And so you use this glorious belly flop to say, well, did we do anything for change management? How much of the focus was on benefit realization for the people side tied to adoption? And say, we get a lot of companies that come to us and say, we're deploying SAP and we've already failed twice, but now we're ready to succeed. And we say, well, what are you doing different this time than you did the times before? And they said, well, we're hiring you. And I said, no, that's not the difference. The difference is you're trying to take change management seriously. And so you need to go in front of the organization and take accountability for the 2 belly flops, and then commit to here's what we're doing different at this time, which is an intentional focus on change management. And then we at Prosci almost always use the research when we say it's time to make budget for this. In the last 10 years, the amount of change management budget has gone from 12% to 16% and back and forth in this range. And so make it concrete for the executives what the ask is. I'm not asking if you say 75% of your benefits are tied to adoption, I don't need 75% of your budget, but I need at least 7.5% of your budget if we're going to get anything done here. And so I think making it real and concrete for them, but pulling the lesson learned out of the mistake, it's only really a failure if we don't pull the lesson forward. If we repeat the same behaviors again and again, then that is a failure. But if we made a mistake and we pull a lesson and we say, next time we do it differently and we run a different play, the different play might be change management, then you've got at least, I think, a better opportunity. But we tell leaders all the time, you have to go take accountability for the belly flop first, because no one's going to trust you if you're out there trying to do it for try number 2, try number 3 the same way.
I would like to wake you up with a question, and that question is, what is the key question, the first question that everyone has in a change that we're facing? What do we want answers? Always. What's in it for me? Thank you. You're following us, and so that would be actually something we need to discuss here as well. So what's in it for the people, and how you build the energy? As Scott mentioned, it's important. So how you build the momentum, how you build enthusiasm for change, to build the capability. So maybe Anna-Lena, starting with you first.
Yeah, I'm thinking, referring to what I heard from people that I work with in changes, both the ones that should do the adoption and the ones working in like the change project or program, let's say. And that's, yeah, this time we're going to do it for real. We're going to do it in the correct way when we start working with change management. So I think that's a great to build positivity and trust for the process, because maybe they've been part of that belly flop, and how do I want to engage if I was part of that belly flop the first 2 times? So I think to build that positivity and encouragement around that, this time we're actually going to consider the people side, and we're going to consider the people side in a structured way to get everyone on the journey. So I think if you talk about what's in it for me as an employer, as an impacted employee, I think that's what I've seen, and that's what I heard anyway, that could, raise some excitement and engagement around that.
So creating faith.
Yeah, faith, that's what I was looking for, yeah.
Jarmo.
Just to add there that people are quite practical by their nature. So if you have to, that when the change is going to happen, it will be happening, and it's much easier to be part of it, planning it, and then having your own influence on that. It's much more easier to commit to the change in practical terms. So I have always said in our organization that change management will happen anyway. It can be reactive, which means that when the project is ending, the line management starts to hassle around with the undone change management. And they are saying that don't stop the project yet because we haven't done the change management yet. And the process says that, yes, we are done, all the things have been completed. Or then the proactive method that we start those key stakeholders together with key stakeholders in the very beginning, put a little bit more efforts than in a normal reactive program, and then make a plan which is then conducting throughout together with the line people to whom the change is going to impact. And that is giving let's say, the motivation part quite easily, because everyone understands that if there is some business reasoning for the change, it has to be done.
Yeah, I agree that I don't think nowadays you can avoid change. It's everywhere. And I think just preparing your people to be part of the change in a way that they know how to reach for more information, how to ask the information they are missing. Because often we get stressed out when we don't know. And then just suddenly some new nice decisions are presented and you need to deal with it. You can avoid all this by doing it in a structured way. And yeah, that's my suggestion to lessen the stress.
Also, don't leave out the 4 middle managers. They play such an important role. They get no vote on which changes are coming. They have all of the direct reports that have to do the changing. And so if we only focus on the sponsor and the change practitioner, we're not getting that last link to impact. And so we've got to put some intention around helping people managers. What is their role in times of change? And it's not a victim. We also need to sort of call that out quickly and say, we're trying to enable you, not trying to torture you here, but we need you to work with us, not against us.
If I can add to what Scott is saying is that what I've seen a lot is that we don't equip the middle manager or the people managers or people leaders, whatever you call them. We sort of just assume that they will be prepared without actually equipping them enough to handle this change in their teams and in their functions. So I think that's also a learning. And we talked about learnings before. This is also one on the list. How do we equip the people managers or people leaders in advance and well enough to handle the change?
One of the great quotes that sometimes haunts me, I don't know if you've heard it, Peter Senge said it, that people are not against the change, but being changed. So that's what I'm hearing from you many is give them control, put them on a back seat, don't forget middle managers, all of these messages. Yeah? So there is something about it that can really create enthusiasm, I would say.
What I hear quite often said is that change is kind of painted on a canvas of organizational culture. So it's a canvas, the culture. So we have different cultures here. We have engineering cultures, we have startup cultures, and so on. So Jarmo, can you perhaps tell something about how have you taken into account culture, the corporate culture?
Well, in our case, what we have done during the past 1 year was actually that we understood that this Prosci methodology it's an excellent methodology, but it's so comprehensive that you have to somehow make it comparable to our internal culture, how we are doing. And what we did actually, we created the Metsä change management model, which is actually a subset of this comprehensive ADKAR model, which helps us to focus more on those topics which are, let's say, in normal behavior in our culture, meaning that there are certain guidance books, intranet pages, certain easy-use templates in Excel and in PowerPoint, and certain subset of questions that can guide you to the right direction, meaning that you don't have to be a 100% specialist or certified Prosci engineer in order to be able to do the change management. The change management is not equal to model. It's part of the cultural impact that you do in your organization. And when you have a good, let's say, skeleton and background in terms of conceptual thinking, and you adapt that conceptual thinking in your daily working and do the plans as it is required, then the success rate is much more higher already, and the time consumed is much less than compared to the situation that you would start from the scratch thinking that, okay, what should I do? And those kind of things now applying this comprehensive methodology to our cultural ways of working has helped us a lot, and we kind of create the culture of speaking the common language.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's quite successful to think about, change management as a platform to also impact the culture. Like if we would like to try to have a more lean and agile ways of working, or if we want to have a more customer-centric approach, we can take those areas that we want to implement in our organization and change the culture. We can use that. We can use change management as a platform to also enable that. Because sometimes I get the feeling that these initiatives that we're driving, they're competing. Like we're trying to build our change management capability. We want to be more lean and agile, or we want to drive some other strategic initiative. They are competing, but actually they are not. we are more successful if we join them and join forces together, because they are impacting the same people. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe to add that when you build this competence of change management across your organization, this will help you to make sure that they already think cross-functionally, and with that, make sure that they keep in mind the specific company culture and how, based on that, lead the change. Because every organization is different and different things work, how you can lead the change or what will work in your organization. And if those leaders who are leading the change work together and understand also those competitive changes that are happening in the organization, then you can lead the change in a more meaningful and less stressful way for the people as well. And with that, obviously, get the faster result.
Still one thing to add is that it's not about the project and change management competencies only. What we detected in our organization that we have a huge variation in our steering group members and their capabilities of handling the change and process overall. So easy thing what we did together with our HR was that we built an e-learning course which was mandatory for all those people who are steering a project, that you have to have the minimum understanding that why you are there in the steering and what should you do in order to provide some fruitful support for the process management and change management. And that was also quite nice and quite easy to go kind of implementation, that our HR just checked the certain roles and we checked the project portfolio, that who are the ones who are steering typically the process, and off you go there.
I would like to ask you, and that's just a new question now. If you walk around in your organization, and what is that sign that told you that yes, we have been successful, we have got moved forward with this project? What was that sign to know that positive feedback? So what will you bring out?
Do you mean that we have like high change management maturity, or?
Yeah, that you have actually moved on with the capability and got people along. And how do you recognize it? Because it is about outcomes finally. So, yeah.
Yeah, as one thing that I've seen is that people use AdCare in their daily life. They use it also privately. I mean, like in my personal life, I use AdCare. You hear them talk about this, and you also hear them talk about that they refer to, well, yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm only on desire. I have to have a discussion with my sponsor about why, and so they use they've really integrated AdCare and understanding for the journey. It's not a single event; it's a journey, and that's what they are basically saying when they're using the AdCare terminology. So that's one sign that I've seen.
So you're listening or looking for AdCare glasses and that's
yes,
okay.
Yes.
Good tactic. Yeah, it should be visible somehow. I like that. And
just one comment to add that more and more in the steering groups, what I have been involved in and other processes as well, there is this question now raised that how about change management? Have we planned that? That is clearly if a steering understands that there is an alien called change management and it should be part of the process management, and they ask it, then we have reached the first step of the maturity.
Mm-hmm. I like as well that those questions are showing you that there is awareness and they're pushing us to raise the bar. I think that's super important. That, I don't think any organization is ready because people are changing and you need to still continuously deal with it. But yeah, I think when you already hear those right questions or people are aware where they are in the journey, and it's a journey. It's not like it's going to be all ready tomorrow and we don't need to worry about this change anymore. It's like continuous process.
So it's not like once a year doing a satisfaction survey and finding out the truth, but pulse checks and AdCare can allow you to actually check in, where are we in the journey? I like to hear that. So to give energy back, because it is difficult dealing with changes, we have there a model that allows us to do it. Scott. Yeah.
We have one client said, we know we arrived when our leaders turned AdCare from a noun to a verb. And they keep saying, did we AdCare that? Have we AdCared that yet? And so I think this is maybe one sign you've arrived. And then one maybe watch out for, I feel like with change management and project management, we want them to come together and work together. But in a project manager's mindset, we get to go live and then we eat a lot of cake. In Change Manager, that's not the end, that's the middle, because you only really feel resistance when you go live. And so I think watching out for letting go of the project too soon and letting your Change Manager move on to the next thing is not at go live. That's usually the middle where we'll start to really see resistance. And so maybe the project team goes away, but change manager's job gets even more important. And so I see some organizations, they take their eye off the ball too quickly because we turned the system on and we did hypercare for 30 days and then we go like this and we're done. And the reality is the change management journey, we're sort of somewhere between knowledge and hoping to get to ability close to go live. And so there's still quite some work to do. And too many organizations, they celebrate success and think they're done because they launched, not because they landed. If this makes sense.
Show by hands, how many of you have seen it that we call success going live? A couple of, yeah, you're very shy. Yeah, that's probably, that's a very, very good one.
But you still should celebrate every step.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation.
That's a good point as well, not to forget the reason. Have you heard this saying, or have you seen it, that email on Monday for training on Tuesday for go live on Wednesday? It's kind of, does it sound like familiar? Sometimes happening. We want results right away, and we call that sometimes mistakenly agile. So I would like to ask you, the panelist, of course it's not really agile, but I would like to ask you, what does change management have to add to the whole movement of agile? How are they connected? How to make agile really work applying change? So anyone, maybe Jarmo?
Well, thinking in our organization, of course, the more mature the culture in your organization is as regards to change management, of course, the more agile you can adapt whatever changes are taking place. I think we all had to make a very fast moves when the pandemic hit us in 2020 March. It wasn't a question about are we ready, because we didn't even know that what are in front of us. So then we found that like many other organizations, that you really can do an agile change when it's needed. I mean that overnight you just started to work remotely. I was at that time in charge of logistics in our group. There was one vessel blocking the whole Suez Channel, and we had a small challenge to reroute our deliveries to China and so on. So these kind of things will always happen, and the key success factor is that are you afraid of changes or are you prepared for the changes? And when you are prepared mentally, meaning mentally prepared for the changes, you can go through as long as needed, and you can get those things sorted out.
Anyone else wants to take that one? Scott?
Yeah, I think everyone in the Agile movement has this mantra: you don't write down and make plans, you just go, go, go. And so if we're trying to build big communication plans and sponsor plans and resistance management plans, we're never going to work. So I think it's much more about using ADKAR. And if you look at the iterative nature of Agile, we still need awareness and desire of the whole thing. But then we need small doses of knowledge and ability on release, and then another dose of knowledge and ability, and another dose of knowledge and ability. And so I think it's understanding how do you align ADKAR milestones with the sprint and release schedule, as opposed to trying to build all of the plans that live in our method. Sometimes we need to do minimum viable change management to be able to keep up. And so awareness and desire stays consistent, and the knowledge and ability turns with the release schedule. And so I think if we can look at that as the approach, it takes a lot of the emphasis off of making plans, which all of a sudden freaks out everyone in the Agile. Like, don't write things down. That's also not what I think Agile is about. And so sometimes it gets misinterpreted. And so in the beginning, though, I think just saying, I'm here to help you be successful. You're here to be successful. We should work together as opposed to trying to fight each other.
Yeah, I believe as well that Agile is about quick decisions and quick change management, but this doesn't mean it has to be the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday approach. Yeah. So you can still do quick when you have a good framework and approach in place, and then everybody already know the language and you can move much faster because you have the templates and toolkits ready. but you should still do it in a smart way. So not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months and do it right. And then you don't need to do that much of the firefighting in the end.
Good point. So that sentence also, for Jarmo, you said, are you afraid or prepared? That's resonating with me, yeah? So, throwing Paul to you now, please. Anything? Last chance, couple questions?
It's Lucas again.
Yeah, well,
we didn't agree with him, by the way.
So what is the short, quick recommendation to keep up the momentum? We know that ECM is a journey and it's not 6 months run. It's like 2 years, 5 years. So how to re-establish momentum, because over the time the energy evaporates? Thank you.
Document and share your successes early. It's amazing how much change managers get shy at the end when they say we were successful, yeah, but it was a good project, or they start to rationalize all the reasons. I find for as much as we focus on communication, we do a very poor job as a discipline promoting the value that we're delivering. And so writing it down, sharing it through intranets and newsletters, and getting sponsors to tell the story about how much value the change management added. Sometimes we just run on to the next one and the next one, and this is going to come back and haunt us if we're not careful. So I think not being so shy and passive around the value that you did create, and they don't want to hear it from the change manager. The more you can feed the sponsor to tell the change management value story, the better.
Yeah, I think as well that share those good stories. I'm sure you have those examples as well, or if you are starting to build out this competence in your organization. What we did at Pipedrive was also sending someone who was just starting to lead a change to the training, and then through this success story, sharing those stories with your rest of the organization. And with that, you can get the desire to have more and more people to be trained as well. Like we started small with small pilot groups, a couple of people going to practitioner training, and really making sure that those important changes that we were leading, someone was trained to actually know what they're doing, so we can move faster and get to the desired results.
Great.
I just have one more thing to add to what Scott and Ilya said, and that is also to share the success, or to share the stories about how did it feel in the organization when we use structured change management. It's great that the sponsor he gets his benefits, he's super happy, but how did it feel in the organization when we worked in a structured way with change management and consider the people side of change early compared to before? If we can get some testimonials about that, I think it also gives a good perspective for the next change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just to add there, sharing the good practice, of course, in many various kind of channels, but I think the best cases are that you have a let's say, not the management position person or change management lead telling the stories, but the normal worker who is there on the line, who has really met and detected the change in practice. If he or she can say something positive about the change management, that is easily to be understood by the other co-workers.
Maybe to add to that, if you have a big skeptic that you can flip, get the skeptic to say, I didn't believe, but now I'm a believer because. And this carries lots of weight because early in the process, usually they're big and vocal. If we can turn them around and change their perspective, sometimes they can be our best advocate.
And you collect numbers as well. I think numbers will help you to prove the point. So if you throughout the change process actually ask feedback and analyze and have the data to share later, that will be your best friend.
Really good advice. And that makes me think, isn't it actually easy thing that all of us could do, that to collect those stories, one positive story that really we're proud of in the company, and something that still haunts us at night or in the evening, and to have those stories ready. So, because every organization, I believe, has successful and unsuccessful, more successful, less successful stories. So let's not just rush to the next change, but take a moment to breathe in and think, what can we use for the future? That's where the enterprise change management moment is born, because that is putting on another hat, taking a bigger picture. What can we learn so that we are more prepared for the future? We are less afraid, as you said, yeah, more ready. So something to think. That's my wish to all of you. And I guess one more message from the panel is it starts with the small steps, really. So there are multiple different ways to do it. One small step, it's like with investment, actually, planting the seeds early enough. You know, those of you who believe in compound interests and really growing the value of your euro, then waiting and seeing. That was another message you said. Wait, be persistent. That's where also the change happens. And the third key word for me was sponsors. Not to underestimate. That was number one success factor. Yeah? And all of you told stories on how to get those sponsors in the room and to get the success going. How to not forget them. Yeah. So find the right people. Find the right people. So these were some insights for me. What would you add?
I think this sums up really, really well the panel, and I think we are closing our time. So do we still have time for a brief poll before we end the panel?
Yeah, we have an announcement actually, maybe to make.
Exactly. Thank you. So thanks to everyone, and we want to actually thank you by offering you free of cost maturity assessment, if you like. And also every one of you get a 2 months access to the Prosci Research Hub, where you find this largest body of change management knowledge in the world. So if you want to have this, you need to contact Eke or me or your other contact persons in Change Partners or in Eezy Flow. So I'm waiting for your contacts. And
what is the maturity assessment?
Yeah, maturity assessment. Thank you for maybe Scott can explain it the best, you know.
Look, it's a measurement system to decide where are we in building our enterprise capabilities for this, and it sits on top of the research, and so it'll give you the ability to benchmark, and we could slice and dice how do you look against European companies, against companies of your size, and so for me it's a really nice way to benchmark where you sit against your peers, against others that are bigger or smaller. And so this is a tremendous offer. To be able to have this service provided at no cost is something I would encourage all of you to take them up on. It's something, if you came to America, there's no free offers. We charge quite a bit of money to do this work. And so I would strongly encourage you, if you're interested in growing your capability, this will at least give you a baseline from which you can grow from.
Great. So it's not a hook, it's a possibility. If you need it. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're real leaders. So great energy. And discussion will continue.
So I think we are closing our online.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
we
for
appreciate
participating.